Welcome, I'm Jade. I wanted to talk about the best books I read in 2021. It was the smallest amount of books I think I've read in a year for quite some time, definitely since starting BookTube, and I wanted to talk about these books in particular because they stood out to me as books that made my 2021. Apart from the actual moving process of Japan, a lot of terrible things happened in 2021 that debilitated my reading. We got delayed from going to Japan, I didn't have a job, I was severely depressed, I ended up reading Twilight, and then I went on a hiatus where I wrote the rough draft of a novel, came back and didn't really know what I was doing or where I was going in life, and both of my cats passed away. 2021 was rough, and these books were not. Despite me not always giving them the time of day in a review, I did really enjoy them and they really did impact my year. So if you are looking for books to really help you with your 2022, I hope that at least one of these appeals to you and you can pick it up and enjoy it as much as I did, if not more. All right, let's get into these books. I am doing these in ascending order, so all of these were my favorite books of the year, but I'll start with my least favorite all the way up to the best book I read in 2021. So let's start off with the adult fantasy book Beast Warrior. This is by Naoko Uehashi, and it is the sequel to Beast Player, one of my favorite books from a previous year. I was really happy with how this transitioned into an adult fantasy because the first book is more geared towards middle grade and is definitely for a younger reader. Naoko Uehashi definitely followed her readers, and so you have this huge time gap in eras where the first book ends and the main character is much younger, and when the second book picks up Beast Warrior, the character is an older adult. She has a career, she has a family, and you really get to see her battle with different types of internal struggles. Because she had so much character growth in the first book, I was happy to see this continual growth. I enjoyed all of the characters in this book, to be perfectly honest, as well as the world building. It felt so good to hop back in, but the thing that really stood out to me about this book was the fact that I got to enjoy characters growing up and growing into new problems. And in order to not give away the plot to Beast Warrior, I will talk about Beast Player very briefly. This is a very cozy, slow story that gives you a lot of Ghibli vibes. So if you're a Studio Ghibli fan, I think you will really enjoy this one. I think everyone needs sometimes to take it slow and let them just figure things out through small little experiences. Not everything has to be an epic battle until the end of the book, where a lot of the story finally comes together and you see all of these small little lessons add up to the final moment where important decisions need to be made and a line in the sand is drawn. So that was my least favorite of my favorite books, which I think is pretty promising because it was fantastic, which pivots me into my next book, which is The Wolf of Oren Yaro by K.S. Villoso. I was not expecting to be surprised by The Wolf of Oren Yaro because everyone was telling me it was epic. Everyone was telling me it had a badass female character who is a queen who's going to a neighboring kingdom to kick ass. That's what I was told. That's what I was expecting. I didn't go in surprised going, oh wow, cool badass character who goes and kicks ass. But I was still surprised at how much I enjoyed this book. I could not put it down. When I was reading The Wolf of Oren Yaro for Draconathon, I was reading it because I was told it had dragons, and dragons are in this book, but I was so focused on the main character and her internal struggle with having a soft inside and a hardcore outer shell that this woman could have been in a grocery store and I would have found her incredibly interesting. The author does a great job of showing you the expectations placed upon a person and how that can dissuade them from being who they truly are, as well as just having really great fight scenes and a plot that was so chaotic I couldn't even figure out if it was good or not because I was just enjoying my time so much. I just walked out of that book being like, oh my gosh, that was awesome, where's the next one? And I did read the next one, but the first one just hits differently, and I'm only putting my very favorites on this list, so The Wolf of Oren Yaro gets the spot, and I cannot wait to finish out the trilogy hopefully this year and see how everything turns out. As far as the plot goes for The Wolf of Oren Yaro, you have a mother first, a queen second, and a wife as an afterthought who has to journey to another kingdom in order to reconcile with her husband. husband. They are, I would call it, on paper separated in the fantasy world, but when she is called to a meeting to reconcile with him, she does so for her son, for her kingdom, and though she begrudgingly admits it, for herself. As soon as that meeting starts, everything just explodes, and I don't actually want to give you much more, except for this woman's battles are internal as well as external, and you really see her take a punch, and you just are rooting for this character the entire time. Next up is the first YA novel I'm going to be talking about, because I did read a lot more adult books this year, I noticed, and the YA novel I read was of course a fantasy, and it was Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. Elizabeth Lim is a new to me author who I absolutely adore now. Her writing style makes me feel like I'm reading an old fairy tale with all the warmth and joy that comes with it. Six Crimson Cranes I also read for Draconathon. Reading about dragons is really something that just brings me joy, apparently. You have a princess who has a cursed place upon her, as well as her brothers who are turned into cranes, and in order to make sure that her brothers do not die, she is forced not to speak. She also has like an acorn placed on her head so that she can't be recognized, and she's going through life as a peasant trying to make sure that her brothers are taken care of while also trying to lift the curse. This has fantastic family dynamics, especially with siblings. If you have siblings, you will recognize the authenticity of bickering between siblings, as well as like an innate loyalty and an overall just love for your family. I absolutely adore this book, and it did prompt me to pick up Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim, which was another one of my favorites for sure. It didn't make the list when it came down to it, but Elizabeth Lim is definitely a new favorite author, and if you haven't picked her up yet, I highly suggest Six Crimson Cranes for your place to start. Definitely not going to disappoint you if you like the sorts of stories that make you feel like you're being hugged. Spiraling back into adult fantasy, we have The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second in the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. The first book blew me away. I have slowly been making my way through Brandon Sanderson's books in the Cosmereverse, and I absolutely adore and love every one of them. He really is a fantastic writer, and where he shines most for me personally is in the fight scenes, choreography, and way that he blends a story together. I really enjoy the way that he makes me appreciate plot in a story. I feel like I'm watching a movie when I'm reading his books, and The Well of Ascension was no different. He took characters who I was mildly interested in the first book, made them the main characters, and sent me on my way. But to sum it up, if you're starting the series, you have a magic system in which you eat different metals to enhance different powers. If you're able to take in all the different metals, you are a Mistborn, and you are super special and super rare and the main character of our story. So this ends up kind of being a bit of a heist book. I think going in not knowing a lot except for the understanding of how the magic system works really is the best way to go, but if you want to know a little bit more, you can go ahead and check out a playlist I have down below, because I have been reading books in the Cosmereverse with a kind of gigantic buddy read that kind of fell apart but is kind of still happening, and I'll leave the list down below, but there's quite a few different videos to check out, and we talk about our thoughts in detail there. Check it out. It was a lot of fun, and I hope in the future we can all kind of pull back together and continue, but as of right now, I'm just vibing with the Cosmereverse and really enjoying the ride. Next is a sci-fi, which I did not know was a sci-fi, and that is Kindred by Octavia Butler. Holy guacamole. This book kind of ruined me. I remember reading it and just being like, this is one of the best books I've ever read, but it was also so contained. Like, the book is not very long. Kindred is not a long book, but it had so much impact on every single page that I kept on feeling like I was reading an epic. It's definitely a classic. It's definitely one you should check out. If you haven't read Kindred, you should, because it was so hard-hitting and had so many traumas to it that I can't say I fully enjoyed my experience while reading it. I just knew what I was reading was one of the best things I'd ever read. I will also have content warnings for all of these books down below, but I think that that is a good time to pick pivot into the fact that Kindred is a book about a Black woman in the 1970s who is thrust into her family's past and is stuck in the deep South in America, where she is forced to protect one of her ancestors who also happens to be a slave owner. And I will also have a few reviews down below of people I think could tackle the issue better, because I just enjoyed Kindred as best as I could and appreciate it for what it is, and it will always be rent-free in my mind and haunt my dreams. So yeah, The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed. This was a very recent read of mine. I just read it at the end of the year. I haven't gotten to talk about it on my channel yet, but I'm so excited to talk about it because guys, it was so good. The main character is so feral and vicious. You just want to squeeze her and love her because you know there's a softness inside of her that is just so good. The Wolf and the Woodsman follows our main character who's growing up in a small village where magic is really important to their culture, but she does not have magic. So when the woodsmen come to claim one of the magic users in her village, she is actually disguised as a magic user, and she is sent off to the kingdom to be sacrificed. While the premise of this book was absolutely fantastic, it was the characters that were thrown together and their angsty romance that really did keep me reading this book. This is one of the best hate to loves I have ever read, and I felt like it was done right because there are so much complexities in this story. This is a Jewish-Hungarian folklore story that has the battling of religions and the battling of cultures, and I think it's really important to point out that I usually don't like hate to love when it has to do with witchcraft and any other type of religious entity coming in and trying to woo the witchcraft person because, ooh, they're so magical and fantastic and feral. But the way this was dealt with was sensitive and poignant and just really, really good. I would love to know your thoughts if you have also read The Wolf and the Woodsman, because so far I haven't had many people to talk to about it. It is a book that just recently came out, but I did end up ordering the physical copy and it should be here soon because I can see me rereading this in the future and just diving back in and finding even more ways to really enjoy it. Moving on, we have A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This book was not supposed to come with me in my suitcase, but it absolutely did because it was awesome. It was one of the books I read going into Japan. I think my initial reaction, and I will have the video up above in case you are curious and want to double check, but I believe that when I finished this book, I wasn't interested in starting the next one because I felt like it was such a nice way to clear things up. It was a good story, and while I could see the open-endedness and the potential to have a sequel, I wasn't interested in reading the sequel. Like, I was kind of like, no, that was fine, thank you. And then a week or so passed, and then another week passed, and I kind of kept on having in the back of my mind this needling sensation to pick up these characters again, regardless of the plot. And I realized I had no idea what the next book plot was and that I didn't care. The point is, I didn't initially think this book was going to end up on my 10 best books of 2021 list. It was a book that I wanted to go back to. It was a book I didn't realize I loved until it was gone. So that's kind of unique in itself. I usually either love a book, hate a book, feel apathetic towards a book, and then that's it. But I guess we had an apathy to love romance, which I don't think is a great trope, but it worked for us. As far as what this book is about, V.E. Schwab is a very famous author, and this is probably one of her most well-known stories. It feels like she's tossing her best work onto the page, and it's not lacking. Kel is our main character, and he can travel between different Londons. There is a red London that is filled with magic, a gray London, which is ours, and it's lame compared to red London, and then a white London, which is like a static sort of magic in a very dangerous place. Kel is also a smuggler, and he is smuggling magic artifacts between these different Londons until he smuggles in the wrong artifact, as well as crossing paths with the lovely and terrifying Delilah Bard, who is a character I'm completely smitten with. This was one of the better books I read this year, and I didn't even know it while I was reading it. Next up is a YA novel, because I still read those sometimes. I have an entire single review dedicated to The Beautiful by Renee Adia. I'm not gonna give you an entire plot summary. I'm just gonna say it ended up at the very top of this list because this is a vampire book done correctly. I mentioned real briefly in passing at the beginning of this video that I ended up reading the Twilight series this year. Is it on my Goodreads? No. Did it affect my Goodreads score? No. Did I think about it after I was done? Probably a little too long. Did I donate to the Quillette tribe? Absolutely. There's a link down below. I also highly recommend watching Olivia Savannah's Read It Backwards series if you enjoy Twilight. But whether you enjoy Twilight or not, stop reading it and pick this up because it's absolutely freaking fantastic. This has so much atmosphere. It's dripping with it. It is beautifully written. I love the characters. The storytelling is well done, and it sets you up for the world building that is The Damned, which is its sequel. So this book had a lot of heavy lifting to do, as well as tackling diversity that is often so left out of period pieces, historical pieces, and definitely vampire novels. This is the best vampire book I ever read. You want to read a vampire book? I'm going to tell you to read this one. I am not putting rereads on my 2021 list. If I'm rereading a book, I'm rereading it for comfort, and so the level is already there. It's not a fair playing field. This was a reread for me, which is why I'm not going to be talking about We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faizal, but I did end up rereading this book because of We Free the Stars by Hafsa Faizal. We Free the Stars is the second in this duology, and it was such a fantastic ending. It just wrapped everything up so beautifully. I loved being in these characters' heads. I loved the magic, and I even loved the villains in this book. I enjoyed reading this story so much, and it really comes down to the writing style. I do love gorgeous prose, but they need to not just be flowery for the sake of flowers, and the way that Hafsa Faizal crafts a sentence down to its core would be something I would call a flowery type of writing style, but because it's just a simple sentence that she put together perfectly, it's lyrical. It is, at its simplest form, a sentence that is just satisfying to read. And I felt like every single sentence in both of her books were lyrical. And I constantly get butterflies when thinking about this duology. So when I read We Free the Stars, I read it twice. I read We Free the Stars, picked up this book, read this book again, and then boom, 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 read We Free the Stars for the second time. It was fantastic. It made me feel really good inside. I felt the warm and fuzzies. I absolutely love these characters. I love their magic system. I love the author. If you are wondering what this book is about, since all I've talked about is everything but what the book is about, in We Hunt the Flame, you have your main character who is growing up in a small village, as one does as a main character. You are either a princess or a peasant. There is no in between. This peasant is also a huntress. She is able to venture into the Ars, which is a dark and creepy forest that is devouring her kingdom of Arawia. But because she's able to go through the forest, she is seen as valuable and sent to an island in order to bring magic back to her kingdom and destroy the Ars, which is again, the forest that is devouring her kingdom. And on the other side of Arawia, you have your other main character, who is a prince, as one is, because you either are a prince or a peasant. And this prince also happens to be an assassin, and he is sent to kill the huntress trying to bring magic back to the kingdom so that his father can remain in power, as well as harnessing possibly the magic for himself. This gets real complicated real quick, as well as having a fantastic love story thrown in. I loved everything about this book. There is nothing less than a 5-star that I would ever give either of these. It's a favorite of mine. I'm so excited to have the sequel of this book coming in the mail to me so I can own it physically and stare at it and love it and cuddle it at night. Going into first place, this is the book that made me cry. I don't cry when I read books. I go, oh, that really hurts. And then I continue reading. I'm an Aquarius. This book had me sobbing. I was not okay. I was like already depressed. But I was also just not okay after reading this book. What book? Great question, because I haven't mentioned it yet. This is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, who is one of the most talented authors I've ever come across, and I can say that with my whole chest, having only read this one book by her. I don't even know where to begin as far as what an epic fantasy book this was, while also being a sci-fi, while also just being like a statement, and it just blew me away. I was buddy reading this with Soleil from Little Reader's Corner and Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe. I ended up powering ahead because first off, I suck at buddy reads. Second off, because I just couldn't stop. I was listening to this on audiobook and I just had tears streaming down my eyes while I laid there and listened in the dark. It's powerful, it's difficult, and it's beautifully done. It also just has a compelling story as well as really well-crafted characters. Every twist hit, every heart-wrench hurt, every moment that N.K. Jemisin wanted me to feel something, I felt it tenfold. So, what is the 5th season about? What a question! I don't know. I could not tell you a good, decent plot summary of this book. And it's not even just because I'm bad at plot summaries. This truly is one of those books that you just read and enjoy and you find out what it's all about. It is truly the journey. I can say that there is a complex magic system having to do with earthquakes and Earth, that this is not just a fantasy novel, but a sci-fi novel. It takes place in a dystopian world. I don't really even know if it's truly our world or if it is an alternate dimension, but these people are not okay. There are constant earthquakes and tremors, and people who are able to control or harness the power of those quakes are enslaved. Dude, it's just really difficult. I have no idea what was happening in this book until each time N.K. Jemisin wanted me to know what was happening. Trust the author. When it comes to this book, you're gonna start off in a second-person narrative and you're just gonna think I'm insane. But trust the author. You don't even have to trust me. Trust the author. She knows what she's doing. She's not messing around. And that is the only time second person has ever worked for me in a book ever, but I don't think it could have been any other way, and it just really well crafted the story. So yeah, don't know what was about, best book I read of the year. I would love to know, what is the best book you read of 2021? How was your 2021? Are you okay? I wasn't, but I'm doing better now, and I would love to know how you are. So please leave a comment down below. Hit the like button if you'd like to. If you dislike it, I'll never know. Subscribe if you want more, and regardless if you do or not, I hope you are enjoying the sun or more stars wherever you are, and until next time, bye! I ended up reading all of Twilight by K.S. Villoso. I always say Visoloso, and that's just dyslexia. I don't know what that is.